There's a movement brewing, and that movement is the Me Total lifestyle.
It centers around you keeping your sense of self intact and in gaining clarity of purpose as you age. I'm Carrie.
I'm Joe.
I'm JM.
And we're on a mission to show you how to enjoy friends, fellowship, and life without substance dependence.
It's time to discover how you can begin living a Me Total lifestyle.
Right here on the FUZZEE'ish podcast. Let's go.
All right. We're back here at the FUZZEE'ish podcast. Your host, Joey Q. We've got JMG. JM, we had a really great conversation with Mike Hardenbrook, author of No Willpower Required, a neuroscience approach to changing your habits with alcohol. What do you think that the audience can infer from this conversation we had with Mike?
Yeah, man. What a great conversation. What a good dude. What an incredible amount of similarities in what his book talks about and what we talk about. I feel like our show could be the kind of neuroscientific approach to not drinking instead of the kind of sober show. I mean, it's that close. Super cool guy with lots of really great perspective. And I think one of the things that we can really take away, and I took away from this conversation, is you can put some real parameters around it and some real kind of objectives to get started, right? I think that there is something to be said for having a kind of first step or a there to how to move towards a Me Total lifestyle. And I think a lot of what he had to say is a great example of just that.
I think somebody told me a plan without goals is just hopes and wishes.
Exactly.
So, I love how he lays out the specific amount of days it really takes to really change the neural pathways in your brain to be able to actually have change take effect.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I'm a direct example of a guy that could not have done this had I not had an explicit directive towards getting the first 30 days, right? Like I did it for that diet because I was driven by wanting to lose some weight and just feel healthier from a physical perspective, and started to feel some of the mental and sort of connective impacts that we've talked a lot about on this show. And so it does not surprise me that there's science behind the fact that if you can make it 66 days without a drink, you're going to be able to have a better perspective and really look at yourself in the mirror differently about your relationship with alcohol to make a more informed decision on what's best for you.
All right. So you heard it here, listeners. Buckle up for an explosive interview with Mike Hardenbrook. We hope you like it, and we hope you share it and you get in touch with all your friends who might be in need of this podcast at this moment in their life. Mike Hardenbrook is recognized for his novel approach to habit change, employing innovative neuroscience-based methods to foster personal growth. Over his 15-year career, media outlets such as NPR, Fox, and CBS have featured his work. Despite his professional achievements, Mike faced personal challenges in altering his alcohol habits. He found few effective resources to assist him. This led to him embarking on a journey of research and personal experimentation. From this, he developed groundbreaking strategies that combine the mind and body, creating a holistic approach to lasting change. Best-selling author and habit expert Nir Eyal endorses Mike's methodologies, praising them as a compelling guide to lasting change. Adam Contos, the former CEO of Remax, commends Mike's exceptional talent in delivering influence that brings about results and drives positive change. Dive deeper into Mike Hardenbrook's transformative techniques at hardenbrook.com. Welcome back to the FUZZEE'ish podcast, the kind of sober show. I'm your host, Joe Quattrone, and with me today are my co-host, JM Guthrie, and our special guest, Mike Hardenbrook, who's got a new book out, or a new book soon to come out, called No Willpower Required, a neuroscience approach to change your alcohol habits, or to change your habits with alcohol, I should say. Mike, JM, welcome to the show.
Dude, Mike, thanks for coming. Yeah, man. Awesome.
So I think you're going to break new grounds on the FUZZEE'ish podcast, Mike. You're our first author that we've had on, but your career spans a lot more than just writing books. And, heck, I mean, me and you were even talking. You're not even a neuroscientist. You just love the field of neuroscience. You love researching and studying, and you felt compelled to write this book. Tell us a little bit before we get into, what really forged your desire to create this book and put something out there for the universe. Tell us a little bit about your actual background. Kind of what led you up to this point in your career.
Yeah, totally. So let's go back. I'll just give a quick synopsis about my background and my relationship with alcohol dating back to youth. So I had a pretty normal, high school relationship with alcohol. I didn't drink until I was probably junior in high school. Actually, I got a question for you guys out of curiosity. When was the first time you guys had alcohol?
13 years old. There was a keg party down the street on Barton Hill. I think JM knows this family. I won't say it on air here, but there was a family up on a certain hill in Reston, Virginia, and there was a keg party at one of the older brothers' houses, and me and I think it was Ben Schrader and a couple of other people. We might have just snuck out of my house and procured red Solo cups and filled them with something. I think it was Beast, Milwaukee's Best.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
My story's better than that. I was younger than that, and I would say maybe single digits, probably not, say 10, 11 years old. Went into a cabinet in my house that had the bottles that I saw people pour into their cups and was kind of curious what that was all about. So I grabbed a bottle of peach schnapps and I poured it in orange juice. It was terrible. Made me feel sick very quickly. And I don't believe I've drank peach schnapps since because of even the recollection that I have right now, thinking about what that tastes like. It's very, very clear. So.
Yeah, smart man. I mean, since we're sharing, I think my first one was my best friend's mom had a liquor cabinet. We got a bottle of tequila. We climbed onto the school roof and we didn't even have a lime. So we got like a grapefruit off of a citrus tree in Arizona and cut it up. And, you chug it and you're like, you don't know how alcohol works. So you think, well, it's not doing anything. So you plug your nose and basically put it down, and then before we knew it, you're kind of on our back and on our asses, okay, yeah, that hit. So anyways, but pretty normal through high school, college. I was a fraternity guy, so alcohol was the center of every single social function. And it was also like, a macho thing to be able to chug beers and, act like a wild, crazy frat guy. But I still did really well in school. Academics is why I was there. I never got into any kind of trouble or anything like that. So it wasn't a major problem. It was just kind of like a product of my environment. Once I got into grad school, however, that's when I think it sort of changed. So I never really grew up, out of that environment from high school to college. And so to me, I didn't drink during the day ever when I did drink. And I didn't drink hard alcohol except for that one instance that I guys told you about. I was pretty much
just because you weren't doing it right, man. All the good stuff happened during the day, man. That's right. That was my job.
I was just an evening guy,
Yeah, I mean, we like to say that we have kind of all the weight classes covered on the FUZZEE'ish podcast of Kerry is our resident heavyweight. He went deep in a lot of things, and it didn't matter what time of day or how many days in a row. Joe, kind of gave it up due to some health drivers and never really had gotten that far into the bottle himself either. And then I'm somewhere in the middle as sort of the welter middleweight. I think, Mike, actually, we'd have to put you below Joe. I think you'd be like the featherweight potentially on our.
I don't know if because it got up there. I was just very specific. Like I was a high producer, and so I just didn't have any time in the day for that sort of thing. And here's the thing: is like actually, and we can go into this later. Is there's a spectrum of where you are within your drinking. I also think there's a spectrum of how it affects you. So, like for example. There are some people that could drink all day long. The next day they wake up, they might be hungover, but like emotionally and functionally, like they don't feel bad about it. There's like they don't have major anxiety or depression or whatever. And actually that's, I used to think, boy, I wish I could be like that. But that survival thing that's, absent in some people is really a bad thing. And for me, like if I was to drink all day, the next day I would just be an emotional wreck. So I also just knew that it wasn't something that I could do, even if I wanted to do it.
Yeah. No, I wasn't necessarily saying you didn't get deep, but like not to drink hard alcohol and not ever during the day. That puts you into
there's a
like
reason for that.
Yeah.
I drink everything fast. It doesn't matter if it's this coffee, if it's water or whatever, I drink it fast. So if I was going to drink, if I had a hard alcohol, that thing would be gone in a second.
Yeah. So Joe, I mean, we can talk about this another time and maybe we'll do it without Mike. We'll talk about him, but I actually think he could, I've hung with Joey Q heavy into the bottle. We went to the same university and he went pretty hard back then. So we might put you in the welterweight, featherweight category for our show, but we'll have to
keep me out of the featherweight. And
yeah, okay, we'll keep you in at least the lightweight.
Bit of prowess here. So
yeah, there you go, there you go.
Yeah, so I don't want to go too long on my story, but fast forward, basically, it turned to grad school. So you're not going to the parties, and you're not going to all that stuff, but I still had that, want to feel like I was doing something like fun or whatever. So I lived in London at the time doing grad school. And so it was a pub culture. So it was always the pub after classes, or it was, a bottle of wine, whether it be by myself or with my girlfriend at the time.
Did you become a soccer hooligan? Is that where the story's going? Were you rooting for Chelsea or something like that?
Oh man, I just could never get into it, to be honest. So yeah, no, it wasn't me. But yeah, so like, it just kind of continued on, nothing crazy. And it wasn't every single night, but as it progressed, I sort of launched a career. I did the 4-hour work week thing where, if anybody doesn't know Tim Ferriss, his whole thing is you work 4 hours a week, spend most of your time doing traveling and enjoying yourself. Well, I kind of cracked that nut and was able to get a full-time income on very little work, which meant, and I operated by myself, which meant I had no boss, lots of time, zero accountability to anybody but myself.
And you were in your 20s at this point? I feel like I would have been drinking way more than what you're describing.
Yeah, mid to late 20s, like 26, maybe somewhere around there.
Let's hear the hustle, man. Let's hear what you were doing for full income by yourself and only having
4 hours a week.
4 hours a week.
And not drinking yourself into oblivion.
Let's hear the code that cracked it, man. Let's hear it.
Sure. So I started, it didn't start off that way. I started this is the most random stuff that I've done. I started an international dental inspections and quality assurance agency, which in a short term is that we inspected dental offices in Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Mexico, multiple locations in Mexico. And
wherever you wanted to go surf, you were like, I want to go surfing in Costa Rica. I'm going to go audit a bunch of dentists' office down there. Is that kind of what you were doing?
No, it's true. I did do that. I mean, it definitely lumped into the international travel. Oh, Panama also was on that group. And yeah, we did go down and we inspected offices. And I partnered with American Dental Association inspector, who's also a dentist, to basically make sure somebody's not going to go down there and get hepatitis or whatever, but they can get deeply discounted dental work. And so that business did quite well. But what I got really good at was marketing. It was my first business. You got to hustle. You got to do all that. And this was like 2008. So like maybe 2006. And there weren't very many courses was not a thing like it is today. People let me build a course. So I built a course and I had met this guy named Noah Kagan on who had a website called AppSumo. He launched the course, which gave me initial traction, and it made a bunch of money. And then I started marketing it. And so I made these courses on marketing, and then I started bringing in experts, kind of like a Udemy style, where you have a collection of other instructors. And so I just built this marketplace full of digital courses. And when I started waking up and I checked my phone, I have like 500 to 1,000 in sales while I slept. I was like, yeah, we're not doing the dentist thing anymore. We're doing this time. And that just basically led into that whole, and we did the whole digital nomad thing. I traveled the world for several years.
Sounds like so much fun. So
yeah, man.
And at this part,
I have
of
so
your
many
story,
questions, but that's not what we're talking about today.
You're still getting wrecked off of alcohol at this part in your life, right? Because you're in your 20s.
Yeah, I mean, every night could be a party.
Surfing around the world. Gotcha.
Yeah, every night could be a party.
So
I mean,
then-
like, especially like we went down to Nicaragua, you know, at the end of the day, of course, like 25-cent beers. Why aren't you just going to go live it up?
So I think JM, I think he might have just scaled me a little bit in the hierarchy, because I was never doing this international digital nomad thing where I was drinking in Nicaragua with like a bunch of people like that are super cool and way cooler than I am.
Oh, and my security guard knew me only at 3 a.m. when I'd climb the fence while he was.
I never had a security guard, so you're automatically cooler than me. So then, all right, so you're an international man of mystery. You're working 4 hours a week.
Right.
You're making a shitload of money. And then what happens? You get a corporate job and you're like, fuck it, I'm going to go work for the man now? Like, what happens?
No, so that's a good question. So I knew at some point that I never was worried about the physical aspects. Maybe that was just in my youth. But I was like, it just felt like I wasn't living up my potential. I didn't think I demand a ton from myself. And so I started questioning it, but it wasn't enough to like trigger a change in my habits.
Listeners, you're here listening to the FUZZEE'ish podcast. You can check us out, FUZZEEishpodcast.com, if you want to check out any of our social media, YouTube to TikTok to Instagram. We've got Mike Hardenbrook with us today. Mike Hardenbrook is the author of No Willpower Required. So, Mike, with that, let's hop back into the story.
Yeah, so Priscilla and I had been together for quite a while, and it was when we were getting ready to have our daughter Haley, our first child, together, that I started thinking, I want to be there and present. I want to be able to wake up in the middle of the night if she's crying and be 100% there, and it really came down to that. Like, I want to be my 100%, and I want to be reliable at any hour of the day or night. Before it, there wasn't a need for that. There was no need for me to get up in the middle of the night and be present, and so that really started to put me down the path of, okay, this is not who I am, and this is definitely not the best version of myself. And so that's when I started triggering a need for change.
Gotcha. And did you go about setting out to see that change in yourself, obviously? And now I know that you still do drink periodically now, but it's definitely not something that dominates your life. And from what I know about you personally, you do have a very healthy relationship with alcohol. But then, in talking to you about the book and getting a quick pre-read myself, I know that this is a very action-oriented manual for how any individual can change their habits around alcohol. So what was it with you to kind of lower that intake, I guess you would say, or lower the frequency at which you were getting drunk and being hungover and all that kind of stuff? How did you force the change in yourself?
Yeah, failing a lot, I'll tell you that. Because to be honest, like, I was at a point where I definitely didn't think I was alcoholic. So, of course, to confirm that, I would take one of the tests online, and yet the tests online definitely told me that I was. However, I did not identify with going to an AA meeting, which is probably something alcoholics would say. But I just kind of was like, I think I just need to be strong. I can walk into a birthday party and they can have cake, and I'm just like, I'm not interested, but I can eat cake. Like, I have a routine of working out. So like, in my mind, why can't I start doing something like this? So I just thought I could brute force willpower this thing into being. And
so you were going to use the Mike Hardenbrook approach to like fasting and like counting your macronutrients, and like, this is going to be a scientific approach to how do I stop drinking less. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah. Well, so I was just thinking then, like, just do it, like the simple answer is just stop. And so I did, like, I would go 30 days, and that was really tough. Especially like if there were events or parties or travel, which there always is for pretty much everyone, there's always going to be a reason. But I would make it to the 30 days. And then what I would find out is I kind of end up back in the same spot that I was down the road, and so then I'm just like, all right, well, shit, like this isn't working. Does that mean I have to quit drinking forever? And that's where I started kind of experimenting with changing my habits, because it was too much when I wanted to cut down or limit it, right? It was too much for me. Like, okay, only 2 at this outside of the house, or like I'll only drink on Saturday, or I'll only do, like, for me that's too much decision. So I was for it had to be on or off, at least to start in my mind, and that ended up leading to a big part of the basis of what I write about. What I was doing wrong was that I wasn't going long enough.
Yeah, it makes sense. The interesting thing that you said, there are a couple of things that I wanted to click into a little bit. I think one is both in my own sort of walk around what we are calling me total, which I think aligns a lot with everything you just said, that there's not sort of a 1 and 0, and that everybody kind of functions and operates differently around alcohol. My wife, for instance, can have a really big night and be super sick the next day and then not drink again for 3 months, and that's fine. She can also say, I'll just have a drink every month, and that's fine too. I was the same as you, where, I wanted to have a drink every day, and I did. And I never took it too far. It was usually 2, 3, 4 beers, something like that. But it was just kind of all the time. But I think the neat thing that you mentioned really aligns to a lot of what we've been talking about is it's not 1 or 0, right? You're not, everybody isn't the same. It's not you drink and you don't. There's all sorts of other paths. And really they're almost unique to each of the people that are going down that path. But the second thing that you mentioned, and I think this is really interesting and something I wanted to click in a little bit further, is all the things that you were looking to achieve with your kid, that was the impetus to even trying to stop, are the things I actually learned as I was stopping, right? So I didn't think about being more present. I didn't think about the relationships with my wife or my kids or my colleagues or even just the community around me in my life, and how much more connected I would be or present. And I didn't think about how much closer I would be to my emotional psyche and like actually feeling life in the way that you do when you're not, obviously changing it with chemicals like alcohol. What would you say to people that don't necessarily have the drive that you clearly have across all aspects of your life, who don't necessarily know those feelings? What would your suggest, or what does even the book talk about particular to sort of coming to the realization as a human between 0 and 1 that probably doesn't think of themselves as the 12 steps either, of coming to realization that maybe a different relationship with booze could be, make a profound difference in their life?
That's a difficult question to answer. And the way that I would answer it is, number one, I think that they have to figure that out. I think convincing somebody that there's benefit to it is potentially, it's like talking somebody into like, look, you got to go on a diet. Like, people are going to resist, right? They're going to look for answers why not to, or why they're different. So I think, unfortunately, that realization, whether it be the same as mine or it's something else, like I want to lose 10 pounds and I can't because I'm drinking beer every night, I think that they have to come to that motivation point for themselves.
Where does the path start with this book? Like, what are the people struggling with? What are the challenges that you're hearing from the community? What are the ways that you're sort of seeing an opportunity to provide this option or this direction specific to the lives that they're leading in order to get to a better place with their relationship with alcohol?
Yeah, for sure. And actually, it's very easy to answer that. And that has to do with what we talked about. There's a spectrum, right? And so it's pretty much like a two-sided classification. It's either you're a healthy drinker and you got no problems, or you're an alcoholic and you need to not drink. But the problem is actually there's a lot of what I call in-between drinkers, which is what I classified myself in, that you want to stop drinking and it may be causing problems in your life, but not to the point of, somebody that has AUD, or is an alcoholic, but it's too difficult to kind of just do it by willpower alone, or just to say, hey, tomorrow I'm going to stop. And so the way that I really kind of take a novel approach is by really addressing the issues for that classification. And there is a spectrum. Like there are people like you that, every day it was like three or four drinks. I mean, honestly, like there was a time where I was going like bottle and a half of wine regularly, So I think the spectrum can go in different ways. And certainly there are people that probably go through periods where they're drinking much more than that, but not to the point that they've reached needing to go to like an AA or a 12-step program. So in my case, it was like, well, where do you go? Or who do you listen to? And, like I told you, I took that test for, am I an alcoholic? It says yes. I turned to Priscilla and she says, no, you're definitely not. And then Priscilla took the test, who doesn't drink a lot, and it told her she's an alcoholic. So like, it's
Right.
like also, how do you even
Well,
find your classification?
You got to understand how the internet works. So like, if there's a test on the internet, chances are it's bankrolled by somebody who has a vested interest in you answering yes to that question and putting you on some sort of, so maybe it is funded by Alcoholics Anonymous or some other entity that wants to get you to stop drinking.
Some other
So,
four work week entrepreneur, collecting his money in Panama while you answer the alcoholism questions.
Yeah. So really it goes to like, what's the resource for that large demographic? So like, just to give you an idea, and as far as like what you just said, Joe, is for funding, like the alcohol industry knows that the top 10% of drinkers account for 50% of all the income that they generate, all the sales, right? 20% fall into that moderate those are the heavy drinkers. 20% falls into that moderate to moderate heavy. There's a spectrum there. And then 70% of the people very seldomly drink or don't drink at all. But 20% of the entire population, that's a big population that at some point likely might want to change their habits, around alcohol. But there's not a go-to like there is for AAs or a 12-step or rehab, and it's irrelevant to that type of person. So what I really wanted to do was like, when I found kind of a method that worked for me long term, I wanted to write to myself basically, because I know there's a lot of people out there just like me that with varying degrees and different backgrounds and of course history and situations. But there is like there's a commonality that I think could be brought together that can help somebody. And that's really about like first understanding like what's going on in your body and your mind. Next, understanding like what are your motivations and like what are the underlying reasons that got you to where you are right now. And it's really about being mindful and taking steps to either replace those habits or change them completely. That's sort of like where I started and where I have come to now.
I would also argue, just based on personal experience, that sometimes the people that you love and respect, the nearest and dearest, the people that are in your immediate inner circle, I don't know what it is and why we do this as a people, but we discount their opinion of what we have to say, because even though they're looking at us on a daily basis and telling us you should stop drinking, we're thinking in the back of my mind, I've got it under control. And every urge is to say, when you're judging me as like my wife or whoever that's really close to me, I'm feeling offended by that judgment. And no matter how hard my wife would tell me that I need to stop drinking, it wasn't until my doctor told me I needed to stop drinking that I actually started listening. And then my doctor is my doctor. It's a credible person, but I don't see them every single day. I see them once or twice a year. But I thought I had to take the medical opinion of somebody that could show me my future of what this thing is going to lead to be if I don't stop drinking, whereas I didn't give enough credit to my wife, who saw it every day or every other day. So I think it's really weird how we do that as a people. We discount the opinions of the people that can bluntly and transparently tell you how it is. And we automatically rush to expert opinion, which I think bodes well for you in your book, right? You could be that trusted third party person that's not your husband or not your boyfriend or whatever, that's telling people, no, if you want to create habit change, you need to do X, Y, Z, and here's a field guide to doing that. So I don't know where I'm going with that in terms of questions, but I'd say from that perspective, like, do you feel a weight of responsibility that there's going to be people that are going to trust you more than they trust their own husbands or wives in the field of habit change or the field of, neuropathways?
Oh, absolutely. There is a high level of responsibility, and it really took a leap of faith and courage on my part to write this because of that responsibility, number one. Number two, to put myself out there and admit that, hey, this is where it was. And I think a lot of people don't like to admit it, like most people, they don't like to admit, hey, especially out there around people that maybe don't drink at all.
Right. Well, it's probably because of what you said about that gray area. Like me and JM and Carrie, we've alluded to this point several times. It's one of the main reasons we created this podcast is that most people hear alcohol problems and they assume you wrapped your car around a telephone pole or that something grotesque happened in your life. And it's just not the case. I mean, a lot of people, you said 70% of drinkers out there could probably easily quit if they wanted to. Or at least that's what I picked up on because I fit into that category. So there needs to be resources for the vast majority of people if they want resources to help them quit. Just like there's resources for people that want to lose 10 pounds. There should be resources for people that don't really drink that much, but they like it socially. And if they want to get off of it, get off of it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and I was surprised, when I started publicly posting that I was writing the book. I wrote the book long-handed, so I would post pictures of like writing it in a journal. And a lot of people that have their shit together, so to speak, would write and say, hey, I would really love a copy of that. And I didn't look at them like, oh man, they're in trouble. They're just looking to change their relationship or switch from their current situation into one that's better, and I don't think you need to be shamed or embarrassed about that.
So let me ask you a question. The similarities in what you're saying to Joe's point, why we started this podcast is actually, something I want to probably talk a lot longer with you directly off the air about. But the idea of there not being necessarily a community that's speaking to those people that are somewhere between 1 and 0 or that gray area that Joe mentioned. It's a big reason why we went through a whole process. To one of our producers actually really sort of said, you guys have to have some kind of mantra to pull this together, right? We understand the net that you're putting out there, but the reality is it's not really sober. It's not really sober curious. It's not California sober. It's not all these different things. And we came back to this idea of me total, which is a play off of teetotalism, but it really centers around, Mike, what you mentioned, which is like, you can't make a change about anything unless you're ready to do it for yourself. Right. So it's not even, while it says me, it's not selfish, it's selfless for all those relationships that you'd mentioned earlier that you were trying to have better connection with. When you're writing this book, or even now when you're promoting the book, is there a way that you tie it together from a community perspective? Like, is there a mantra or sort of like a short form version, not the long format notes of your neurosciences that you sort of talk about? This is the life that or that you're living personally after going through this process as a person or as an individual.
That's a good question. I don't think I have an actual mantra together.
Me total, man. Your mantra is me total, dude.
You be an ambassador of the podcast.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
So, I mean, I think what James going for that is like temperance. That's a word that I keep locking in on. And temperance has a lot of polarizing effects because, 100 years ago, it was used in a very kind of weird way. People were trying to ban alcohol federally and stuff like that. It actually led to prohibition. And if you look at prohibition statistics, the amount of like domestic abuse went way down. Like a lot of stats went way down. There's a lot of good things that happened during prohibition, but then it got repealed and alcohol boomed and all that kind of stuff. But this idea of locking in on the word temperance, or if you want to use a less polarizing terminology, adulting, right? Like, I consider myself a professional adult. I like being an adult. I'm trying to have accountability for all of my actions. I want people to look at me and what I do, especially my kids and my wife, and be proud of what I do on a daily basis. And it's much easier for me to do that if I don't consume alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
So that's at its core, that's kind of how I feel about that. Now, we put some fancy words on it, excellence through temperance, because I think the excellence part is what I would hit on the most. We do want to destigmatize, people that don't consume alcohol, because all Hollywood would ever tell you is that we're a bunch of squares that drive people around in a designated driver. We're Uber
X's
drivers
on our hands,
or we have X's on our hands, and we're straight edge and we don't consume anything else. It could be further from the truth. There's a wide range of people that don't drink alcohol, including most of the CEOs of the brands that you consume right now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what our mantra is, more of that excellence through temperance, that me total vibe, like just really investing in yourself almost. And I think where we could probably tie it back to what you're doing, because a lot of the people that I see talking about this online, I mean, sobriety and non-alcoholic and the non-alcoholic movement is like permeated all through society. But you see all these clinicians and you see all these doctors and Stanford Medical School, Harvard Medical School people, rolling out their 60-second TikToks and going viral, and they got their own podcast talking about how to supplement magnesium and all this different kind of stuff. I feel like right now the non-alcoholic folks are kind of getting lumped into that kind of neuroscience TikTok world. And for better or for worse, I don't care. I think it's a better place to live than being considered the Uber driver or the square that's driving everybody around kind of person, or the person that killed somebody in a car accident. So
I think the question, Mike, for me is, do you think that there's, as the most psychological and scientific thinker on this call, is there importance or value, as we're trying to encourage others to read your book or to reconsider their relationship with alcohol, to have some mantra that people can get behind, or at least the motivation factor of, some flag that's better than AA, specific to encouraging that, like that sort of first step in the process, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So I can answer that. And that makes perfect sense. And exactly what Joe said. So, really, it's about, all I'm asking from anyone that reads the book is to start to understand their relationship with alcohol to start. And the hard ask that I have in there is that you just stop drinking for 66 days. After 66 days, you can choose whether or not you want to reintroduce or go further. So in my case, and this is also my hope, is that asking forever up front is very difficult, especially when somebody's into, like, they're locked in at that point. They're still hooked into something. So asking them to let it go forever at that point, that's difficult. I'm just asking for 66 days. Now, after 66 days, you're going to be a different person, And so at that point, that's when they need to reevaluate and think to themselves, do I want to do this forever? Do I want to do this for another 66 days? Do I want to go for a year? That's really like what I'm hoping to get them to, is give them the tools to get through 66 days, which, like, there's scientific reasoning behind that number as far as habit formation. As the mean number, habits can be formed between 18 and 254 days on more of a recent study. The more simple a habit, like brushing your teeth, is shorter, and the more complex, like running an ultra marathon, could be, much longer. But really, it's about getting to that point and then being mindful thereafter. So you've gotten there. If you want to reintroduce, you are now equipped with the tools to look out for the warning signs. You're now equipped to understand, like, what is your trigger.
The benefits.
You're more in tune to see when your habit starts repeating itself and replacing your good habits with the old bad habits. And then maybe you need to say to yourself, well, I gave that a shot. Moderation's not going to be for me, or maybe they have reset their, I have a chapter called the pendulum theory, and it's about how we go back from one extreme to the other. And really, if you don't stay at one extreme long enough, it's just going to keep swinging back and forth because you didn't get enough of the habit change. So really,
it's 66
yeah.
days without drinking, regardless of what your intent is. So if I wanted to slow down, if my intent is to slow down, not to stop altogether, what you're saying is the direction 66 days, no drinking, and then reassess.
Right. Yeah. And, and I put it
Makes
in this
sense.
way, these terms, like, hey, if like people will be like 66 days, that's long. Some people really think that, especially if you drink like every weekend or a happy hour every night. But if you were like think about like if somebody told you, hey, listen, you can start a business that's going to make you a bunch of money in 66 days, people will be like, oh, that's quick. I'm all
nothing.
in. But if you say, hey, I'm going to give you a program in 66 days, like you're going to sleep great. You're going to have better sex. You're going to have more energy. You're going to perform better. Like all these, you're going to have better spirituality, like better relationships. Like think about that. That's like life-changing. But for some reason, people think that it's 66 days is a long time.
Dude, I love this.
Well, think about it this way: like everybody every year re-racks their year and says it's a new year, and I'm going to have a resolution, and I'm going to do all these things, and it's going to happen in this next year. Granted, most things fall off after 30 days, but if you actually just went through the 66-day approach, you could create 5 new habits that will last in the next year, or you could change 5 habits that you want to get rid of, and like if you're doing all kinds of drugs and alcohol. So if you use that approach and you really look at a calendar year, if you really want to create resolutions and you want to use a neuroscientific approach to actually get it done the real way, one at a time, 66 days, you do 5 things.
What's super cool is my story started with a diet, right? The Whole30 diet, and I didn't drink for a month. And then I was like, let's see if I can make it 66 days basically. And I did. And then all of a sudden it was, let me make it through the holidays. And so I subscribe to what you're saying. And I certainly saw the benefits as I made it another day and another day. And I definitely would have been the one that said 66 days sounds like a really long time. And then once you've made it 66 days, it's like, what's another 66 days? Now I'm feeling this little bit differently, and sort of on and on. I've told Joe this story. The guy I talk to on a weekly basis, who's been so helpful for me in so many aspects of my life. He's been part of my alcohol-free and me total lifestyle too. When I hit a year, I was so proud of myself. I was like, I hit it, it's a year. Hooray, 1 year, no drinking. And he was like, congrats on a year. Welcome to the rest of your life. And that's when the shit, like, because hopefully that number is much bigger than 66 days, right? And that it's some thousands of days. But yeah, man, I just so profound that thinking. And
the good thing is that it gets easier,
right? Exactly. So much easier.
Really, you just have to get to a couple weeks in that 66 days and it gets easier. And then if you get to a year, you're smooth sailing, as long as you're like you're mindful of and conscious of yourself and your emotions and how you react to them.
Dude, life, one of our other hashtags is just keep it moving. So if you can keep it moving past 2 weeks, past 66 days, now for me, almost 2.5 years, it all of a sudden doesn't even become a swing thought anymore, right? It's just part of life. And you start to realize and value and measure all the benefits that are coming and all the bounty that you've received in all the, various aspects of life, both personally and professionally. And certainly one of the things you said, and we talk a lot about, is just the connection and the relationship, not only with the other people around you, your wife, your kids, your family, your colleagues, your community, but also yourself, dude, right? Like you understand yourself at such a profoundly different level that allows you to make these decisions so much more informed. And it sounds like, I can't wait to read the book, because I think a lot of what you've said hits so closely to what we subscribe to and certainly believe in and why we're here.
That book is No Willpower Required, a Neuroscience Approach to Change Your Habits with Alcohol, with Mike Hardenbrook. Mike, is there a place where our listeners can connect with you, a website, a social media platform that you'd like to connect with our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. My website is hardenbrook.com, my last name. And if you want to learn more about the book, you can go to hardenbrook.com/NWR, as in No Willpower Required.
And when is this book coming out?
It is going to come out after the New Year, so I don't have a hard date on January, but if people go and register on the website, I am going to send out early digital copies, so it'll be out sooner than that.
That's cool.
Awesome.
We can try to release this episode a little closer to the holidays so people can do an advance order or pre-order if you've got that live on your website at that point. And we can also bring it back from a social media standpoint and promote it a little bit when the actual drop date happens. And for sure, we'll order a bunch of copies.
I'm getting on that
for
list
us.
today too.
We'll get on the list. We'll order
copy.
some advanced copies for friends and families and
No
try to
doubt.
really push it out because it's really aligned philosophically with what we're trying to do.
So
here.
close. Yeah, it's crazy.
Hey,
Mike, this is awesome. Anything else you got for me or JM in the meantime?
So I don't like to get into like the money that you'll save by not drinking, but I get into the money that you'll the time that you'll save because it's crazy. So like, let's say you do happy hour every night for 2 hours, or you have a bottle of wine in front of the TV for 2 hours. Well, that's 2 hours, right? Let's say you're not going to wake up at the same time probably. So let's say you wake up, instead of waking up at 5, you wake up at 7 or 6 or 8. That's another 2 hours. Then you get up and you're unproductive for at least like probably 2 to 4 hours on top of that the next day, comparatively speaking. If you drink every single day, you literally lose 30% of your year. It's crazy.
30% of your year saved by not. I mean, dude, the similarities in what you said. I'm excited just to keep you as a close friend to all the things that we're doing around the podcast. I look forward to being an ambassador of your book.
Cool. Well, that's all we got for you today, Mike. That's all we got for you, listeners of the FUZZEE'ish podcast, the Kind of Sober Show. I'm your host, Joe. We've got JM here, Mike signing off. Until next time, we'll see you around.